Breaking tonight, growing outrage directed at the Pentagon after a senior official publicly releases key details about our upcoming war plans against the terror group ISIS in Iraq. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. The news coming during a briefing with reporters. Officials disclosing the timing of the planned attack, the location, even the number of troops involved. Already the fallout has begun, with military intel officers telling Fox News the details not only help the enemy, but could put lives in danger. We'll have much more on this shortly when we speak with Lieutenant General Tom McInerney and Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, who is also an Iraq war veteran. But first, breaking tonight, the Obama administration has just wrapped a terror summit 6 months in the making, meeting with dozens of countries as the world faces almost daily images of murder, torture, beheadings, and innocents set on fire. And tonight, it appears the administration believes a key to this fight is community outreach. The 3-day summit on combating violent extremism is now in the history books. 3 days of sessions focused on fighting terror, with a focus on social media, empowering communities, and creating economic opportunity for would-be radicals. Turns out Marie Harf was right on message. We have reports that Vice President Joe Biden today called attention to Christian hate groups and violence done in the name of the Bible, while the president chose to key in on the need to expand human rights and peaceful dialogue.
Lift up voices of tolerance and peace, especially online. We have to get serious about confronting these economic grievances. We have to address the political grievances that terrorists exploit. When people are oppressed and human rights are denied, when dissent is silenced, it feeds violent extremism. And finally, we have to ensure that our diverse societies truly welcome and respect people of all faiths and backgrounds.
Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry is live tonight in Washington. Ed?
Good evening, Megyn. For the second straight day, the president looked like maybe he was more in an ivory tower than in the middle of a war. Take a listen to some of the final sessions, the titles of these final sessions that included, quote, understanding violent extremism today, and, quote, cultivating economic opportunity for communities vulnerable to radicalization. Critics like Republican Homeland Security Chairman Michael McCaul said today this was a summit without substance, that the president spent more time explaining why young Muslims may get into terror rather than spelling out what he's going to do to defeat ISIS. Even some Democrats are saying that the focus was off, while Republicans are stepping up pressure on the commander-in-chief to send in ground troops. Listen.
And that focus is on this Islamic extremist threat that is posed not only to the United States and the American people, but around the world. From what we've heard so far, the administration is really claiming that the motivation or the thing that's fueling this terrorism around the world is something that has to do with poverty.
We're going to have to put boots on the ground, my friend, and we're going to have to do a lot more things than we're doing now if we are going to stem this tide.
Now, part of the reason John McCain said that is the administration did announce some progress today, a deal with Turkey to arm and train the Syrian moderate rebels to be ground troops on the ground in Syria against ISIS. But the administration said they've only got about 1,200 Syrian rebels ready to go. Remember, Congress funded and approved 5,000. So they're making progress, but still far short of what they need, Megyn.
Ed Henry, thank you. Well, while the White House invited lots of what it called moderate Muslims to this 3-day seminar, critics are questioning how one controversial figure made the list. The man to the left of the president in this picture is Salam al-Mariyati, the president of the Muslim Public Affairs Council. He is an Islamic activist who declared right after the 9/11 attacks that, quote, we should put the state of Israel on the suspect list for the 9/11 attacks. He has since said he's sorry. He also compared Islamic terrorists to, quote, American freedom fighters hundreds of years ago who were also regarded as terrorists by the British. Mark Thiessen is a Fox News contributor and an American Enterprise Institute fellow. Mark Hanna is a Democratic campaign vet and a partner at the Truman National Security Project. Mark Thiessen, how does this guy get invited to a conference, a summit like this?
It's mind-boggling. I mean, President Obama won't invite Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House, but he will invite an Islamic activist who said that Israel should be considered a prime suspect in the 9/11 attacks, or another person, a member of his organization, who said, quote, Adolf Eichmann was himself a Jew, so in fact the Jews killed themselves in the Holocaust. How does this happen? How do these people get invited to a conference fighting? I thought this was a conference on fighting extremism, not giving it a platform. These people should have no role to play in combating Islamic radicalism.
Mark Hanna, in researching this guy, it appears that he not only has worked with the Obama administration, he did work with the Bush administration as well. But does that excuse it? I mean, when I looked into his background and I read a lengthy article by Andy McCarthy at the National Review online, and he talks about how this guy's group condemns terrorism before non-Muslim audiences, but neglects to explain that it does not consider resistance against those who, quote, persecute Muslims to be terrorism. And he has many examples of this group's support of Hezbollah and Hamas and incendiary rhetoric. What was he doing there?
I think you just answered the question, Megan, by saying, look, this guy has been working, and same with the Muslim Public Affairs Council, has been working for 10 years with our Department of Justice, has been working with our local law enforcement. This group is a mainstream moderate Muslim group. He's absolutely said stupid things in the past, for which, as you correctly reported, he's apologized for. But it's very rich to have Mark.
For one of them. I found an apology for saying Israel may have committed 9/11 against us.
Megan, we always wonder in the media, every time there's a terrorist attack, we wonder, where are the moderate Muslims? Who's going to come out and speak out against this? This group is the group that always does that. If we try to alienate this group, who are our allies? Of course there are going to be Muslim groups that get invited to
ones that support Hamas and
happening.
Hezbollah, groups we recognize as terrorists. Mark Hanna, Mark Thiessen, you tell me whether the fact that the Bush administration worked with this group at times as well excuses having them at this conference.
Mark Thiessen, I think Mark Thiessen should answer why. Okay, good. You should answer that.
If we invited them to the White House, we shouldn't have done it either. But the point is that this group is not, if you're saying these are kind of the moderate Muslim groups that we should be working with, this is a guy who said most Islamic movements have been branded as terrorists as a result of rising extremism of a handful of militants. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah have been misbranded as a handful of militants. I mean,
but it's not just that. I mean, reading Andy's article further, he says in 1993, for example, this guy Mariotti proclaimed, when Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death," that statement epitomized jihad. And he goes, I mean, there are so many examples of this, and examples of a Palestinian attacking Israeli families on a corner and getting shot dead in response to his, or getting shot in response to his terrorist attack. And this guy called for justice to be delivered to the shooters here in the United States without mentioning that he was shot because he was attacking a bunch of Israelis. I mean, this guy seems to be rather radical, Mark Hanna, and it just feeds into a narrative that people have about whether the president is taking the advice of the right people and whether he's focused on the right things at this summit.
I think he is. Look, there were groups from this summit. You mentioned, the Christian people mentioning the Bible. Yeah, I've spoken with my friends who were at this summit, and they mentioned that there were groups from Northern Ireland there represented. There was the Anti-Defamation League, the sort of Jewish group that rightly calls out and criticizes anti-Semitism. This was a diverse group, but it wasn't, I'll mention, this kind of interfaith gathering. We know that violent extremism in this throughout the world this day and age is coming mostly from groups that are affiliated or sects of the Muslim faith. And so we absolutely need Muslim groups there. We can take quotations out of context like this right-wing journalist that you're mentioning. And we can do that. We can do that to conservative America. We can do that to Republicans and make them out to seem like, Rush Limbaugh has said all the, we can take anything that
you're comparing this guy to Rush Limbaugh, a guy who justifies Hamas and Hezbollah,
Mark,
and
you're a white
guy who says, I'm sorry. A guy who says that Hamas and Hezbollah are the equivalent of the American founding fathers, a guy who said after the Fort Hood shooting, after it was absolutely clear that Nidal Hassan was in communication with Al-Qaeda, with their leaders in Yemen, said that it was just because he had psychological problems. I mean, this guy just dismisses terrorism, justifies terrorism. When you compare Hamas and Hezbollah and terrorist groups to the founding fathers, you are justifying.
Let me ask you this, Mark Thiessen, before we go. Listen,
I
want to ask you this because the question is whether what we had here, this three-day summit, was a social justice organization. I mean, it was a summit on social justice and how we need to improve the economies in these countries and the healthcare in these countries and items that have been favorites on the left, as opposed to going squarely at the religious ideology that motivates terrorists.
No, we're talking, there were 3 pillars to this, and one was attacking with kinetic military might, attacking with air power and striking down and killing terrorists. That was discussed among us and our allies at the State Department as part of this. There was also, yes, a community angle, and we can trivialize that all we want. We can say that's somehow soft power, or it's a democratic idea, but it doesn't stop the fact that most of this terrorism that is coming out of these kind of homegrown communities is coming out of communities that are Muslim communities. And so, under the Bush administration, under the Obama administration, the Department of Justice has been...
I mean, I ask you, Mark Thiessen, whether that feeds into what Marie Harf was saying, which is we need to find them jobs. And as the president himself pointed out yesterday, you know, most of these terrorists who hit us on 9/11 came from wealthy families. Osama bin Laden came from a wealthy family. Sure. And it's been well documented that most of these terrorists arise from the middle class or upper middle class.
That's true, but look, I have no problem with what we're talking about with soft power as long as it's backed by hard power. When soft power is used without hard power, it's just softness. And that's the problem that we have here. When we have the United States fighting ISIS, when we have the United States fighting ISIS with the military is fighting with one hand tied behind its back, because every military commander has told the president we need boots on the ground and the president won't send them, and then we're having all this discussion about these soft issues, it's nothing but weakness.
Ed Henry had just reported on, and he's called Bill O'Reilly unfair on this.
You're confusing me by bringing up Ed Henry when we just talked about Patrick Henry. All right, I got to go. Good to see you both.
Good to see you, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
We have more coming on our breaking news about the Pentagon revealing parts of an upcoming battle plan to take on the terrorists. General Tom McInerney and Senator Tom Cotton are next with that. And America's mayor now taking serious heat for an incendiary comment about President Obama. Right now, go to facebook.com/The Kelly File to read the mayor's full remarks. And Mayor Giuliani is here live to respond to the controversy he has created. Plus, the defense rests in the American Sniper trial today, and we have details on the testimony that left Chris Kyle's widow in tears.